Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And it's the start of a new year. How exciting is this? 2025. I am excited to dive into a new year of talking to fantastic women every week. You know my drill. I like to amplify the voices of women and have them share their stories so that listeners can learn, get inspired, get important information, and a little bit of entertainment along the way is always a good thing as well. So I'm really excited to kick off a whole new year. I'm also excited to say that I have a new podcast sponsor to start off the new year with, which is fantastic. So I'd like to give a shout out now just at the top to say thank you to Budget Through Life, who has been my sponsor since last March, Budget Through Life with Emily Hickox. But I also want to thank Gabby Lynn of Reinvented Threads, who is my new sponsor. So I'm super excited to have her. These two women are beautiful in what they do in their lives. They have a positive approach to everything. And I'm just so glad that they see the positivity in what I'm doing here with Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. So without further ado, let me get to my guest to kick off the new year. We're going to be talking wellness. Every year around this time, we're like New Year's resolutions. How do we make change? I think that's great. It's not that I'm against that. I just feel like we need to focus on the fact that we don't have to wait till January. Or if we do it in January and we find that it's a struggle and we want to give up 2 weeks later, it's okay to restart the following week. And my guest this week is going to help us talk about that. So I would like to introduce my guest today, this week, Elizabeth Kuiper Aguirre. Welcome and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Janine. I'm so excited to be here.
This is something I usually do at the top too, and I actually forgot today. But I always like to say kind of how I know my guest because I just think it's so important, especially during the pandemic. We kind of got disconnected from people for whatever reasons, and we don't need to dive into that. Like things happen, and we got disconnected. And I think it's been hard for some people to get back out there and reconnect. And I like to share how I know my guest just because I like to remind people how important it is to kind of be open, checking out things, exploring, going to that event that maybe you don't feel like going because it's cold out or it's too hot or whatever, because you never know who you're going to meet and how you can help one another. So Elizabeth and I actually had met. I don't know how we got to meet in the first place or how, it came to be, but I actually went to a school that Elizabeth founded, Wellkind, here in Scranton, and I shared laughter yoga with the staff and students there. And this is many years ago. And we did not see each other after that. And then all of a sudden, just a few weeks ago, she was out meeting with Bill Leonard, who's a lovely, wonderful guy. He has Leonard Work Solutions. He helps people with resumes, changing careers, great advice. He's a real good guy. They were having coffee at one of my favorite places, but my absolute favorite coffee place, Retro Cafe in Scranton. The girls are great there. And Bill brought Elizabeth over and said, I want to reconnect you guys. And that's how we got reconnected. And I was so excited because it had been years since we had seen each other. So I was so glad he brought you over. And here you are, and you're on the podcast. So I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and let me just fill in there. We hadn't seen each other, but I had been going to your laughter yoga, your virtual ones that you were putting out. I don't know when you started that, but I know that I found them during COVID, and like you said, it was tough. You had to find new ways. So that was really instrumental for me and my mom, who was spending a lot of time with us at the time because everyone was in their own bubble. And she was in my bubble. And so, yeah, we were able to enjoy and have a new experience together. So that was really special. So we hadn't connected, but we were connecting unbeknownst to you at the time. And then back at Retro Cafe is where we got to physically see each other and make that connection again. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and let me say too, I should mention that I did notice LinkedIn, when you're connected with a lot of people, I did occasionally see your posts, or maybe you like a post of mine. And I say this, and I don't say this with any disrespect, but you meet people along the way and sometimes you're not instantly reminded where you know them from.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't recall exactly, but I knew we were connected. And seeing you at Retro Cafe, I will say this much. I'll use this as I am always giving mini TED Talks, probably too many for people. They're probably like, shut up, Janine. But it was so nice that when you did share with me at Retro Cafe that you were enjoying the laughter yoga. I do it on my Facebook page, Laugh to Live. And I really, during the pandemic, had I will say this much, for as bad as the pandemic was, things came out of it for people because it was a time of change and reflection. And for me, I hadn't been doing that much with the laughter yoga. I had kind of gotten away from it. It had become really challenging. And then during the pandemic, we were all at home. So I said, I'm going to start doing this on Facebook. And I
Mhm.
started doing it more online, and it was a way to connect with people. And when you told me that it meant something to you and your mom, I just want to say that that literally like filled my heart. And I think it's a good reminder. And I say that not just for me to tout myself or my own toot my own horn. If people impact you in a certain way, please try to remember to tell them, or even if it's like a month later, a year later, when you did this, I felt really great, because it does help people to feel good. And it also kind of solidifies sometimes, for me, my own mission and purpose when I get
Mhm.
lost sometimes or doubt myself. Having that nice moment of gratitude and positivity, we need to keep sharing that with one another. So I just want to thank you very much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. I totally agree, and thank you.
So let's talk about, before we get into, so I want to talk a little bit about the school that you founded, because I think it's a very cool concept and I think it's wonderful and much needed. The 7 pillars of wellness and the philosophy there. And we'll talk about your coaching. And then I want to get into some tips that can help people now in this new year. But tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about yourself, because I don't know much about you personally.
Sure, yeah. So I've always been interested in the personal development space, and I know this by the books that I have as a 16, 17, 18, all the way through my 20s, because I find books, I'm like, yeah, I really have, this has been chasing me for my whole life. But I really got into wellness and it started with physical wellness, doing some workouts at home when I had my third son. So I have 4 children. My third son was born. He was about 5 months old. And I had one of those why not me, why not now moments. And it was actually another woman, a friend, that just uplifted me and posted something online, just putting it out there, right? You never know your impact. And she just said, what are you waiting for? To everyone. And I took it in that morning. It was early morning. I was holding my 5 month old on my hip. And it was just a why not me, why not now moment, that there's not going to be a better time to start taking care of myself. I have 3 boys that are depending on me to take care of ourselves, because we know that research shows that kids are as happy as their moms. They're as happy as the woman, the primary person in their life is. And that has a lot to do with wellness. And it started with exercise, and I hated every moment of it. And I started with at-home workouts because I knew I couldn't make a commitment to go to the gym. I had midnight wake ups and I was just not sleeping very well. So I just decided I was doing at-home workouts, and I picked the shortest workout that was available. So it was 22 minutes at the time. And I'm like, I'm not doing the 25-minute workout. The 22 is what I need here. So I started with that, and just started really getting into taking care of myself. And this was a long time, a period of time. This wasn't an overnight, wow, I love this, I feel great. It was small steps, and we'll talk about that later. But all of that just really spurred my interest in wellness, a holistic wellness, when it comes to our emotional wellness, our mental wellness, our physical, all of the pieces together for me started to come together. And I had already been owning an early learning center for years at the time, and just really wanted to put all of this into the programming, because when you start to have children, or if you have children, or you work with children, or young children, there's not a lot out there for their age. A lot of things start in kindergarten, everything's kindergarten and above. So I really noted that this birth to 5, which is when 90% of brain development happens, there wasn't much there when it comes to how do we holistically value education. What does that mean for young children? And I thought, if we teach these skills, because they are skills, at a young age, they're going to go to kindergarten with a toolbox that they can use when they are stressed. And yes, young children do get stressed. Anxiety is one of the biggest issues that comes up at an early age. And honestly, it pulls us all the way through to adulthood when we start to recognize sometimes when it's already having a negative impact on our lives. So that was really important to me. So I started to really put those programming pieces in, and I think you coming to the program was pre all of that. But obviously, again, these things were just in my mind. I think I was pulling them towards me in different ways, and you were one of those special people that came to us while this development was happening. And so changed the name. Wellkind School became what it is, and focused on 7 pillars of wellness, and they are all pieces of our life. So we're talking emotional growth and brain development, and we're talking about gratitude and appreciation, and we're talking about purpose and passion. So these are all pieces that we teach, and through that, I got my certification in health and life coaching and specializing in functional nutrition, and it just all kind of snowballed into what has become just what I love to do, live and breathe. I have 4 children, as I said now, and my daughter is my 4th child. And I think seeing myself through her eyes, knowing that the modeling that I'm doing about how I feel about myself and my body is extremely impactful to her. And she just turned 6 last week. And it's become something that's more than, it's a mission, like you mentioned before. It's just something that I feel I have to bring to the world. And so through health and life coaching, I started a company, Life Purposely, which is living life on purpose, not by accident, not autopilot, not going through the motions. And I truly believe that women can have it all. We can have it all. It's not a myth. We can have it all, but we need to choose what having it all means to us instead of what society dictates that the meaning to us. So that's through coaching, I'm able to help women believe again that their dreams can come true, that they are the catalyst to making their dreams come true. They are empowered to do so through the choices that they make. And the key for me is to keep it so simple, which is what we're going to talk about today, because I am a total type B personality with some type A tendencies, but I am not, this home cook that just loves to, meal prep for days and, so into exercise and so into all these things. These are all skills that I've developed over time, but I do it in the simplest way. And one of the courses that I teach, it's bare minimum effort, maximum impact. So it's really truly giving our bare minimum in all areas of our life. And I know that's counterintuitive when we hear that, but it truly is defining what does it mean for you to give what you need to feel fulfilled in that area. We don't have to go all out. And we'll talk about how that affects us in the new year. So that is, I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you gave me a lot there, so I'm glad. That's a good place to stop. So I just want to go back for a couple things, and we'll go forward. Wellkind, just for people to understand it, who might want to be able to benefit from it. And it's in a school in Scranton, so it's still. And is it still pre-K to kindergarten, or what is the ages that you have there?
Yeah. So now we changed a bit. We expanded our pre-K population. So we have our 3 to 5. That is most of the school is preschool and pre-K. And then we have a classroom for our young toddlers and our older toddlers. So the 1s and the 2s, getting those skills in early. And then we do have a before and after school program for our kindergarteners to 5th graders. But majority of students in the building are 3 to 5.
Okay. So for folks with, young children, this is a great thing to check out. And I find it interesting, like you said, the brain development, 90%, right? So you think about that, that's a really important time, right? To pick up some really positive vibes. And, you mentioned anxiety for kids. It's interesting. Thankfully, we're becoming more aware of this for kids. And I mean, every generation is different and we've all had our struggles. So it's not like, my mother, I love my mother and father. I'm blessed to still have them, but I'm a Gen Xer. So I had anxiety as a kid. And I didn't, I mean, we'd be like, you think back in the day, and my grandmother was a tough Irish woman. She'd probably be like, what the hell do you have to be stressed about? Like, really, that was kind of the philosophy about kids. But I was the type, I'd get very nervous about going to school and I didn't want to go. But yet I did well when I went, grade wise, but socially in kindergarten. And I went to a Catholic school, and I always joke, but yet there's probably some trauma behind it. That the nuns kind of straightened me out because the nun for first grade said we don't take crybabies in first grade, and I remember that vividly, and it did change me. And I was like, okay, I got to be a good student. But we were not in a place back then of okay, counseling or talking about wellness. Like it was just a different time, but it's so important that these types of programs do exist now so that, I mean, what you take with you, you carry throughout life, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I had a very similar experience, K-8, in a Catholic school. So I relate to everything you're saying. And I think obviously there was no malintent there, but I think that there was very much of a diminishing, or excuse me, a minimizing of feelings. It was just to get over it. He said, like, what do you have to cry about? So I think we have an opportunity here to help children recognize their feelings. And in that, I think what's so beautiful is it's for the it's always for the children, obviously at the school, but our philosophy is that the staff and the families are just as integral in what's going on. So when we are working with children, we are healing ourselves too, so when we're teaching the skill, we're also utilizing the skill, and therefore we're able to capitalize on those gains that the child is receiving too. So yes, we can do so much with learning how to navigate those emotions, and it's something that takes time, and it's something that we can always, like you said earlier, try again, start again. It's not an all or nothing.
Yeah. And I like what you just said too, when you're helping the children, the family, all that, you're experiencing the positivity too. And I will, just bring it back to me for a second with the laughter yoga. I always feel good when I'm leading it for other people. So while I do believe in it and I love seeing their participation, smiles and everything, I feel better when I'm finished. So it's and I found it interesting. I saw on your website you described yourself as an ambivert, and I had only heard that term somewhat recently in the past year or two, because I used to joke, I don't know if I'm an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert, because I was the kid growing up who was smart on paper, but I would not raise my hand. I wasn't super, gregarious. I didn't really get involved in a lot. And even in college, I just wrote for the school newspaper at Penn State, but I didn't get into a lot. And I was very shy about in my 20s getting into improv, doing comedy, which I wanted. And I do it now, but I still kind of have that balance where I do like my time alone, but yet I also love connecting with people. And I think that's interesting. I know that, like you said, you have it on your website too. And I think so obviously you can relate to that as well. And I think that's an interesting quality or interesting way, I guess, of living.
Yeah, and I think it's learning about ourselves. I think that's the most beautiful part of growth and development. And when you put a lot of attention on yourself, it is so healing, and you get to learn about different parts of yourselves that maybe at some point it felt like there's something wrong with me. Like, why do I enjoy being with people, but then I come home and I need to be alone? Why do I, and it can take me when I do public speaking or I teach classes, I can be down for the count for a day or so. And that doesn't mean I'm in bed, covers up. Of course, I have 4 kids. I can't do that. But I do notice myself needing that recharge. And I, in the last few years, through coaching, learned that about myself, that that's okay. And to just accept that and plan for those things and know that some people get energized being with others, and some people, that is an energy pull. So although I really enjoy being out and, at that cafe that we were at, there were so many people and I'm interacting and I like that, but it is an energy pull for me. So, others are pulling my energy, even though I want to be in that interaction. Therefore, when I go home, I need to recharge. And maybe that means taking a little bit of extra time for myself in the morning and having an extra cup of hot coffee and taking a few moments, or journaling, or a few different things, techniques that I use. That's what I need, and that's okay. And I think just being aware of that has taken away so much pressure that I put on myself.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about the life purposely coaching, and you kind of just answered this. I did want to ask you, having four kids, like you said, you can't just go home and go under the covers. And I don't have children, so I get to be, and I'll use the word selfish, even though it's just my life. It's not, I mean, I'm there for my parents and for friends, but I have this time for myself more than someone with children does. And I was going to say, what does that look like for you? How do you get to recharge when you have four kids? And your youngest, right, is 6, so they need,
Yeah.
they're probably like mom, I'm guessing. But you kind of just answered it, so it's kind of I guess smaller moments that you get to take for yourself.
It is. It's smaller moments. And I also get up early, which I know is also eye roll. A lot of people are like, I don't want to get up early. But what I noticed, I never did that before. I would go to bed late. And what I noticed about that was I was trying to recapture time for myself late at night, time that I felt I didn't get during the day. So I would be mindlessly watching a show that it was an indulgence, right? I needed this time. So, but I realized there was never a sense of completion. I would just stay up too late and then start the cycle, wake up the next day and not feel great. So I had to shift that. And I read a book that changed that for me. And I started getting up earlier. And when I did, I just started 15 minutes earlier. And then it just kept growing to the point where my husband said, you have to stop somewhere. You can't just keep going 15 minutes earlier. So I get up at 5 and I take that time in the morning. My kids, sometimes they don't get up till 7. Today they got up at 8, which was awesome. So that's 2 hours every day that I get for myself. And when I say I get for myself, I'm not tasking. I'm not unloading the dishwasher and doing these things for the household. It's me time. And I think that's another thing that women need to stop feeling bad about. The selfish piece there is really a narrative that we need to shift for ourselves. But yeah, that's time for me. So it is light a candle, hot coffee, read a book, write. Sometimes I'll listen to a podcast or read, start some coursework, or I'll do some work, but they're all passion project type of things that I'm working on. So that's how I get the time. And I realized no one's going to give it to me. Nobody says, hey, can I watch your 4 kids? I'm going to take them out for a couple hours. No one ever offers that, Janine. It's just crazy. But yeah, so I have to make it. And I think that's just something I had to accept. I've never been an early bird, and I've trained myself to be one over the years, and that's given me back what I needed.
Yeah. So a couple of things I want to say. One, I'm the wrong person because I won't be saying, "Hey, can I take your 4 kids for you?" I'm not a big kid person. I'll freely admit. But as far as the getting up early thing, I think that's an interesting conversation that keeps being had, because I remember years ago when I did leave my job at Blue Cross to become like an entrepreneur and do my own business. My friend read Success Magazine at the time, and I don't even know if it's still around. This was back in 2000, maybe 9, 10. And I would listen, and all of these articles would say, get up early, get up early. Like that's the one thing that these folks who are successful seem to have in common. They got up at 5 a.m. And I will freely say that for me, I'm not a morning person. So I would get up early for flights if I was traveling, or when I was running, and I've completed 2 marathons. So when I was training, you're going to do an 18-mile run or even a 15-mile run or 12-mile run. You have to get up early. Other than that, I don't like it. So I'm working on that. But I've had people kind of counter that. And I think, kind of to your point, I think you said a few minutes ago with women, like what works for them. A lot of women say, well, you know what? I get things done. It's not about the time you get up. It's about how well you're using the time or how you use it, right? Because I have some friends who stay up very late. And they don't sleep the day away. They just sleep a little later, but they're more productive because they're night owls. So I think we do kind of have to keep that in mind. But ultimately, it's whatever ends up working for you. And you're finding that this works for you, which is great.
Yeah, I agree. You have to do what works for you. And if you have different, like right now, my kids, they're not going to not wake me up. So I have a cutoff time. If I wanted to sleep in, I can't, to a certain extent. So I have to take a hold of the situation. And I find that starting the day on your terms, starting the day or ending the day on your terms, that's really key. I mean, it's just about choosing to create this structure for yourself, whatever that is. And some people call them rituals or routines. And it's really important to do that day and night. So however you want to stack that, I find my creative time is in the morning. But if my creative time was in the evening, then I would just build around that. But one of the things that I tell clients and we work on is protecting yourself from the world. So that time is your time. So I don't let anybody in that time. And that means I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not looking at news or reading email, because that is letting others influence me, my thoughts, whatever is what I'm feeling. So I really put boundary around that time. So whether it be an hour or on the weekends, I get the longer time. So 2 hours, sometimes it's 3 hours before my kids wake up, and it's great. But I don't do things that are going to pull my mental energy, which again is just could be scrolling, because you see something, it spurs a thought, you start thinking on other things. So it's really about creating that structure for yourself that allows you to have a moment without the world starting to pull at you.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And let's talk about that as we talk about planning for the future, or what people can do with this new year and different thoughts. Social media, I think, is obviously that's a whole different topic that we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. But I think it's important what you just said. No matter what we want to do in our lives, or kind of change we want to make, or improvement, or indulgence for ourselves, whatever it is, those boundaries are so important, as you're saying, because I am fully aware I am 100% guilty of this. I say guilty because I'm aware of it, but I'm a glutton. I keep doing it. That's one of the first things I do in the morning, and one of the last things I do at night is scrolling, and it's become a mindless habit. And I mean, it was created that way. It was meant to be an addiction, truthfully, and that they made it like a casino games. I mean, there's proof of that out there. And we are, I mean, I'll say I am anyway, addicted. And it's like you just said, it's letting others into it's stealing. I find myself stealing my own joy
Yes.
with that, and with my own self-doubts. But it's often, at 53 years old, I can only imagine what young kids who have a different mindset. So I'm influenced by it. I see it. Oh, boy, she's doing a lot with her, oh, she's doing all this, or, oh, they're traveling. I don't, and
Yeah.
I do the comparisons. I do the all kinds of thoughts, like you just said, and that can really steal peace. It can steal joy. It can be very tricky.
Yeah, and again, you can do whatever you like. If it is a digital detox is before bed is important for good sleep in general. And I know that's just, again, it's a habit shift. So one of the things that I do and I recommend is my cell phone is far across the room. So that not only helps me get up in the morning, because I have to get out of bed and walk all the way. And the key is I walk past my bed towards the door. So I would have to reroute and go back to bed if I was going to do that. So it's just a habit to grab the phone when the alarm goes off and walk out my bedroom door and down the stairs. So right there, I'm initiating a new brain pathway. This is what we do. And that really helps. That stopped my nighttime scroll, because I found when I plug in my nightstand right next to my bed, I mean, it is, like you said, it is addictive. I mean, I have to have my phone away, not near me, in order to not touch it. And I'll have the best intentions in my pocket, or I put it over there. And it is just how it is for most Americans, unless we're intentional about keeping it out of our space. So that's actually one of my big goals that I'm going to be embarking upon in this new year, is really setting some more boundaries, like you mentioned earlier, around digital time and how and when I'm going to let it in. I do have that morning and night piece covered, but it's still just reflexive, you grab and all of a sudden you're 5 minutes in, and then, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I say about the rabbit hole, because I've gotten into a habit of, I talk to myself to stop certain things. Like when I'm driving and I'm in the car for literally 4 minutes, and all of a sudden I'm already complaining. I'm like, oh, look at this guy. I guess he doesn't have to stop at stop signs. And I'm all over, and I will say out loud to myself anymore, Janine, you're not going down that rabbit hole. And I try to shift, so I'm not just complaining about stuff, but it does take certainly intention, like you're saying, a conscious effort. So before we get into, I love that tip, and we'll get into that more. Tell us a little bit about, so you have Life Purposely. Tell us a little bit about what you do with that, how long you've been doing that, and then we'll get into the idea of some, maybe some changes in the new year.
Sure. So since 2017 is when I really got into the coaching field. And of course, it does weave itself into the way that I run the school, with staff, with workshops that I offer, things like that. It definitely has a coaching wellness piece. That's a big part of it. But for Life Purposely, I do one-on-one coaching, group coaching, teaching wellness classes. And generally it's one-on-one coaching, which is 6 weeks of personalized, tailored coaching, which is helping women really make progress on the goals that they set for themselves. And a lot of times they are just a superficial goal, right? We choose a goal. I want to start exercising. And that's a surface goal. And through the process, we get down to the root of it. Why is it important to you? And what does not making a shift here, what is that costing you? So we really get down to the part that helps you connect, helps women connect to their why. And you hear that a lot. What's your why? But it has to be an emotionally charged, it has to be an emotionally charged reason behind what you're doing. So it has to evoke some sort of emotion when you're thinking about the importance of what you're doing. And if you think about it, it's probably what keeps you on track as an entrepreneur, and me too. It gets back to that impact, right? There's an emotional response to what I'm doing. And when you have those moments, that's what gets you back on track. If you're feeling a little disconnected, or there's moments when, of wonder, where you're comparing and all of that, it's that getting back to the core of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's really important that we connect that way. And I think one of the reasons why our goals for ourselves don't stick, we can say, is because we haven't done the framework that we need to start with. So we haven't dug deep enough to a point that's helping us connect with our goal on a level that is beyond motivation, because motivation is not getting us anywhere. One of the things that I like to tell people is we cannot white knuckle our way to wellness. You cannot just grip something so tightly. I want this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to work out every day, I'm going to eat XYZ, because when we do that, when we hold so tightly, then we go off the deep end with it, right? When we let go, it's just a full let go. What's the point? And I'm just not going to, and we go off track in a big way. Whereas when we take a really smart and intentional and well thought out approach to our wellness, and we chunk it down into really manageable steps, we don't have all of these added pressure pieces that just make us feel like it's an all or nothing, that if I'm not perfect with this, then I can't do it. And so that's really the key. It's starting out with that framework, intentionality, a little bit of a deeper thought before we get going. And with some of the clients that I'm working with right now, what we're talking about is, January 1st is looming, right? And everyone has this date in their mind. But what about if we took a more proactive approach and said, I have these things going on, right? January 1st is just a miscellaneous date and time. But for me, I'm going to do my planning on January 2nd or January 3rd, and get my mind right about this whole goal that I have for myself. Excuse me. And then January 8th is my new year. That's my new year. That's when I start. And again, that's just a start date. So it doesn't mean that that's smooth sailing from that point. I love to tell people to just shake it up for yourself. Don't be on the eternal Monday train, because when we are always saying, oh, I'll start Monday, then what happens when we slip up on Tuesday? Then we waste 5 days and wait till Monday. So I say, be crazy. Start on a Wednesday, start on a Sunday, start on a Thursday, because when you do that, you are re-shifting. Those brain patterns are no longer existent. That the old framework doesn't work. We have to build new. So that's all of these little tricks and pieces that we weave together really helps build a new system, because our old system didn't work. I don't know about you, but I struggled so much about my self-image, my self-concept, and body image. And I went through puberty at a young age, so my body filled out way beyond before my peers did. And so I always had a poor body image because I didn't feel like I looked like others, and that comparison started at a young age. And yeah, constant roller coaster, constant hamster wheel with every diet and the book and every, motivational moment where it's, this is the new me and Monday starts the new way and all of that. So I think that's a common story for women, and it plays out in different ways. But we have an opportunity to make a new way, and a new way is not trying to work with even things that might have worked in the past, because if you really think about it, it didn't actually work, because if it worked, it would still be working. It worked for that moment, but if it's not sustainable, then it doesn't work. So that's my real teaching, my real purpose, my real motivation, my mission is to help people understand how to create a sustainable system for you that works with your life. It's not Janine's life, it's not Elizabeth's life, it's your life. That's my passion, is helping people figure that out for themselves. And if you can consistently live this way and feel fulfilled, feel rich, and, well in all areas, then you've got the key to success. Then you're going to live a completely different life than you're currently living. And so I think my goal is to let women know it's not a myth. It's really possible to live intentionally, live the way that you want to live. It really can happen.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts I had in my head. One of them, and this is just a side, working with individuals, how do you keep from, I should say, having, and we talked a little before about the energy drain. How do you keep it from becoming too much of a task on you, because you're trying to help people and they have their own stuff, right? And you're giving them good tips and things, and you're connecting with them. How do you keep yourself recharged so that you're not taking on their stuff and then having it drain you even more? What works for you to be able to do this work, which is so good, but without losing yourself, and your good stuff?
Yeah. So I think the key is coaching is not therapy. So it is not a therapy session. So I connect my clients to therapists if that is where things are going. So if something seems to be too emotionally charged, or it's something that is a deep trauma, or something that is truly something that needs to be worked on with a professional in that field, then I do suggest, recommend for that work to happen, and it can happen simultaneously. That can be happening and coaching can still continue, but it's not a therapy session. So it's very strategic. It's of course it's empathetic and supportive and all of that, but it is not, I don't take on what they're going through. And sometimes, just like you said, you have to talk to yourself. I do the same thing. That is a real strategy. It really works. I put on what I call like an invisible cloak, almost like a Harry Potter shroud. Sometimes I say, and I do this for myself when I have to go into situations that might be challenging, or sometimes you're around different people that are more energy sucking, but you have to be. I just say to myself, you are putting on the cloak and you're protected. It's almost like a bulletproof. And so I just say to myself, anything that comes towards you will go back out. So it's kind of just pushing back out. So nothing is going to penetrate that shield that you have up. So you can be silly with that. You can imagine a Captain America shield. You can, whatever works for you. But I think we need to do that. That's just another way of setting a boundary and protecting ourselves, because we need to protect ourselves at all costs. And because, as I said before, as well as we are is how we show up in the world, right? So we have to do what we need to do to be our best, so we can be there for those that we love, and we can show up in the world as the people that we want to be. So that doesn't come from just give, pour out, pour out, pour out. That comes from actually protecting those moments that we have and doing what we need to do to feel good. So yeah, coaching sessions are more strategic, and yes, we get to deeper levels, but we're almost connecting threads. That's how I like to describe coaching to people. One of the analogies that I like to use is, imagine that tangled necklace that you have. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even figure this necklace out. And my daughter likes to shake it, and like she'll go like this, and I'm like, no.
I throw it away. I'm just kidding.
Right? Sometimes it just feels like you might just throw it away. But if you do take the time, if you imagine that sometimes you're pulling, nothing's working. And then all of a sudden you just get that one piece, and you have this vision for yourself. This is going to work. If I just do this and that, it's all going to come together. That's how I like to describe coaching. We don't actually know where it's going to go. And oftentimes the goal that we set for ourselves, we get to that goal, but not in the way that we thought we would, right? It's not about just making a plan and all of that. There are pieces at play that we don't even know about until we get to work with them. So I like to describe it, it's like pulling those threads, and then we figure it out, and then we unravel, and then the client sees that clear path, and then they might connect something. We might say, now, does that make sense? Because if you think about it, your past experiences were X, Y, Z. So doesn't it make sense that you would be seeing it through this lens? And is there another way that we can approach this? And all of that, it's really about asking the right questions. And I think as humans, we don't do that as much as we should. Those reflective questions, I do that often, and I suggest that with my clients, giving them questions to just, let's see what comes out. Just write and see. And we're often surprised at what comes out on paper. And I think some people are even afraid of what might come out, but we don't have to be afraid, because all of that's information, and then we can choose to do what we want with it, or just leave it there for another time. Sometimes I leave things, we say, okay, that came out today, and that's interesting. It's something to think about, and let's see if it relates to something else that comes out in the future. So we can be fluid. We can be, we can be patient with ourselves and allow things to unfold. And it shouldn't be a push. It's not a boot camp style, scream in your face coach type of thing. It's a real, unfolding, and there's a natural pace to it, and sometimes it speeds up a little bit and we find some things out and there's a wow moment, and other times we have to sit with some things and see how they fit in. So it's really my favorite thing in the world, is to help people do that for themselves.
Yeah. And so as we start to wrap up, and I want to try and come up some words of wisdom, and we've touched upon some of them with the boundaries, and I like what you had said earlier. I want to get back to that about giving the minimum to get the most out of it, and the idea of what it looks like for you is what it looks like for you. You don't have to compare. And I think for me, what I find sometimes, and I think it just goes back to the boundaries again with social media, sometimes it gets so overwhelming, not just even with the news or negativity, but thinking you have to do all this stuff. And I'll give a small example, like with my vitamins. I've got a B12, I've got a biotin for my nails because they started breaking. I've got, I've got the probiotic, and then oh, geez, I'm 53. I should be taking this. I need magnesium. I need that. And it's 15 different ads for a foundation to cover up my wrinkles or to illuminate. And it's enough sometimes. And then when you're a solopreneur, you're like, I need to take care of this paperwork. I need to be doing this and that. It can be downright enough to make you your head explode like a cartoon character. So you've got all that, and sometimes we bring that into the new year because you're seeing what everyone else is doing. You're seeing the latest trends, and how to detox from social media, how to detox from alcohol. You're seeing all these ideas. What would you say to people, especially women, because I think we're marketed to the most and we have so much going on, to get started with this mind shift or any kind of change whenever we want to do it? How do we, we could just say put the phone down because that's part of it, but it's still a lot, even in culture, in society. What would you say to women to try and just help us okay, let's calm down?
Yeah, I think one of the big exercises that I like to do, and I think it's a good time of year for this, is it's called future pacing, and just looking into the future. And it helps melt away all of that noise that you're currently feeling, and saying something to yourself like, what do I want out of the next year, and start to just journal on that. What do I want? If I could fast forward through time and it's December 31st, 2025, what would make me feel like I had the best year? And what does that look like for me? I would go on a girls' trip, maybe reconnect with some friends that I don't get to see. I would make sure that I moved my body in ways that felt good 3 to 5 times a week. I would, and just start to write all those things. And then you can go even further if it's still too close, because this year, as we know, went by quickly. Sometimes we need to go 5 years in advance and to just say, looking back, if I reflect, if I go 5 years in advance, what would be the action steps that I could take today that would help guide me to get to a point that I feel good about? Because as you and I know, time flies. And if we are not actively working towards what we want, it's not going to happen unless we do things today. So we have to be careful who we're comparing ourselves to. A lot of things on social media, again, are not real, or we're comparing ourselves to someone that is 5 years ahead. They've been doing this for 5 years, or a lot of things you don't see on social media. Maybe someone like looks great, but maybe they've been working hard every day. I don't even like to say working hard because that's just a standard. I think just working on themselves in private, right? And then we just see a finished effect, or, you know, wow, she seems so happy. Seems like she's got a lot of good things happening. Two things can be true. That could just be what it looks like on social media, or it could be that they have been doing a lot of work on themselves behind the scene. And a lot of that inner work, you can't, there's not something you can say, this is what I've done, right? But it's those little pieces. But that would be one big tip, would be journaling. And some people say, I don't like to journal. Okay, then just make a list. Just write 1 to 10. What are things that I would feel so great about my life, about myself, about my experience if I achieved in the next 5 years? And I can promise you that's going to go by in a blink of an eye. So we really do need to be taking purposeful action steps. But the bare minimum, like you said, is something that I really like to help people look at. What does it mean for you to show up and give enough that you feel satisfied? Because when I said earlier, we can have it all. Yes, we can, but we can't be max effort in all areas of our life at the same time. And I think we just need to be aware of that. Right now, I want to put a lot into my relationships. It's really important to me right now. And it could have been spurred by a life event, right? Maybe something happened and you're like, you know what? I really want to spend more time with friends. Time goes by and I've noticed. So this year that becomes the forefront of what you do, relationships. I'm going to make it a point to spend, 1 day a month, whatever, or 1 time a week, I'm going to call a friend, whatever it might be. But that's your bare minimum. And then you can also have a max effort. What does a max effort look like to you in that area? So if we say nutrition, or let's say physical activity, that's one of the areas, right? So maybe your minimum effort is to move your body 3 times a week, and your max effort is to move your body 6 times a week. So as long as you're hitting your minimums, you have to feel good about that. That's done is better than perfect, that kind of mentality. And I think that's where we fall off course a little bit, is when we try to say, okay, here we go, January 1st, I'm going to the gym every day and I'm going to work out for 1 hour every day. That's not achievable for most people because there's a lot of obstacles that come up. What about weather? What about, other people? If you have kids in your house, if you have, then you have to maybe you're taking care of a sick parent. So things happen and things shift. So we have to be able to make a minimum and a maximum effort in different areas. And the areas that I focus on with clients are physical activity, nutrition, relationships, purpose and passion, which is making sure that you're doing things that you enjoy and you're maybe learning new skills, or like you said earlier, trying something that is a little out of your comfort zone. So everyone's going to have different reasons to focus in different areas, and different chapters of your life are going to be more prevalent. One area is going to stand out more than another. So I think it's really important to take time right now and say, what do I want the focus of my year to be? This is the year that I have to reclaim my health, or I have to get it together in that area and feel like I'm not on this hamster wheel anymore. So joyful movement, moving away you like. We don't have to fit this stereotype of I go to the gym every day. And I'm not knocking going to the gym. If that works for you, awesome. That is so great. But maybe you like to dance. Maybe you like to jog. Maybe you like to just stretch. You want to get into yoga, whatever feels good to you, or mixing them up and making your goal be movement, not I'm going to go to the gym, because that's so specific that if you can't get to the gym, you're going to be like, I can't get to the gym. I can't do it. No, you can, because you committed to moving your body for 20 minutes every day in a way that you enjoy. Everybody can stick to that. You can turn on music in the kitchen while you're making dinner, 20 minutes, done. And everybody likes to check a box, right? So we have to make it easy for ourselves to check the box. And I recommend stacking the boxes as much as you can in the beginning of the day, because that's when our brain is able to do more and we don't have that decision-making fatigue. By the end of the day, we make poorer decisions, and that's just always going to be, that's just human nature. So we have to play with that and play into that by saying, I'm going to move my body every day for 20 minutes before noon. Let's just say that. And then if you get another burst in the evening, great. Then you did double, right? But your bare minimum was taken care of. So that's the way we make it sustainable, and we don't do things that we can't continue or that are not reasonable for us. So I still do that. I exercised this morning for 23 minutes, 23. And that was that. And I'm done for today. And then I'll try to get as many steps in as I can, just because it's wintertime. It's harder to do that sometimes, depending on where you live. But it's about finding a bare minimum that feels good to you in that specific area. And that is really a key element to building the year the way you want it to be, and not the way you think you should. Should I don't like the word should. I like to say get to. We get to do this. You and I get to connect with others. We get to do the work we love. We get to move our bodies because we're in healthy bodies and we can move all of our limbs freely, right? Everybody doesn't get to do that. So that's a mind shift too, is turning the shoulds or the have tos. Have to is a very negative way of seeing something, because it feels like an obligation. I must, I have to. And it brings this heavy energy. But if I get to do something, it already has this perkiness to it. It has this exuberance. And I think just thinking about that and putting it in the right perspective, I get to focus on my health this year. That's a privilege. I get to make choices that benefit me. And framing things in that way really helps, because it's not about motivation. It's about intentional choices and the discipline that goes along with just following through, which means that you are in alignment with you. And that's a really key piece, is that you honor yourself, and you honor yourself by doing what you say you're going to do, by following through with the commitment that you made to yourself. Because I can assure you that most people listening would honor commitments with others before they honor their own commitment. And we need to switch that, and we need to keep the same pace that we keep with others with ourselves. I honor myself by following through with what I said I would do. And I'm making it easy on myself to follow through by chunking down my choices and making them so doable that it's harder not to do it. If I say I'm going to move 20 minutes a day, that's what I'm going to do, because I honor myself and I deserve it. I deserve to feel good. I deserve to build the life that I want to be leading. It's mine. It's my life, and it's the only one I've got that we know of. So yeah, that's my biggest piece.
Yeah, and that's all, I think, great advice. I think for me, what I'm hearing too is a lot of it, it really has to be about the individual. And I think however we need to not focus on what others is doing is, we need to get that out of there right away, because, and word choice and how we talk to ourselves. I know I used to joke all the time, I should was a big word, and I still find myself wanting to say it. And then I kind of I probably look like a goof when I'm talking to people, because I'm like, well, wait a minute, I got to get rid of that word. Because I said for years I've been shoulding all over myself, and I know I've heard that somewhere. I didn't say that, but I've heard that, and it's the truth. And I should. it does have a negative because you're right. It's like, oh, I have to. It's that have to kind of mentality. But I like what you're saying. Although I will say I've heard the get to. I've seen other people post about that, and I kind of laugh because I'm like, certain things in life where you're like, wow, I get to pay this bill. Yay! I know that's not the mentality, but it is important how we talk to ourselves. And I know my thinking lately has been similar to that as far as like the minimum. Like, okay, I did it. I'm saying better. Something is better than nothing, and we're kind of trained like that's not good enough. But for me, I mean, depending on where you're at, like I'm not running like I used to be. And first it was just slowing my pace down. And now it's, I'm getting a little winded. So I'm going to be having some I'm going to have an echocardiogram in January because I want answers, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
still capable of walking and I'm still walking
Mm-hmm.
50 minutes. And maybe if I'm at the I prefer outdoors, but when I'm indoors, I'm still doing an elevated, like, incline and I can still do that. And so there are days when I'm like, well, I got out for a 20-minute walk. It's better than nothing. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're afraid because we think it's that all or nothing where it's like, oh, but I didn't do the hour or I didn't do, but you want to, like, to your point of the movement example. I think it's a great example because it's like, but if you move for 20 minutes, that's awesome. So I love that idea of checking the box and like you said, the minimum and the maximum, because it makes things a little bit more, I think, attainable. And then we don't beat ourselves up, which is the backside of the goals. If we're not fulfilling them or we feel we're not doing enough, then we end up, I know for me personally, I end up beating myself up. And then not only did you not complete something, but now you're being mean to yourself about not doing it. So
Yep.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the 5-month-old that I described at the beginning of this chat, he is now 8 years old, and I've been doing the bare minimum for the last 8 years, and teaching others to do so too. And I can tell you that since that started, since that whole movement started for me, I have never fallen off track because it's not possible to fall off track in the way that this system is. So it's really about just making new choices and shifting to something else. And I am 42 now. So I definitely noticed a lot of shifts in the last few years and things that were working, and maybe my movement, it seemed to just it seemed to stall, and I had to do different things like take some new vitamins and things like that and add strength training to my personal experience. But again, everyone's different, and it's okay. Because I had this mentality, I was able to pivot pretty easily without just throwing my hands up in the air and being frustrated at what's totally natural for women and our bodies. These things are not taught to us. So we have this disdain for things that happen naturally to our body systems. And once I got some more information about that and what's natural and what I don't need to be scorning, a natural thing that's happening, I just find the way, and we all have the ability to find the way. And that's, I hope, the message that there is always a way to feel better doing it on your terms in the way that's best aligned with the life that you want to lead.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought to close on. I think this is all great. And even though, like I like to say, like we talked about earlier, you can make your changes anytime, but let's face it, a lot of us will be thinking about it now with a new year. Of course, it's natural, it's human nature. We've got a fresh start. And so if you are thinking of making changes, listen to the advice that Elizabeth has given. I think it's wonderful. I think it's helpful. And I think it's doable, which is the whole point, which is great. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy and all this great information. If someone does want to learn more about your coaching or, I know that there are websites. There's a website for Wellkind for the school. If you live in Scranton, you want to learn more. But do you do Zoom coaching just so people, if they're not in Northeast PA, they can connect with you?
Yep, most often it's phone or Zoom. So it's lifepurposely.com is where they
Okay.
can go for more information.
Great, lifepurposely.com. And I will put that link in the show notes so that if you check it out, you can click right on it. So that's great information. So, folks, I do have a lot of listeners outside of Northeastern Pennsylvania. So it's great. You can connect with Elizabeth from wherever you are. So, thank you again. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad that we reconnected. It's so good to get out there and get coffee out in the community, right?
Me too. It was so great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to thank my listeners as well. I'm so excited. Like I said, 2025, great year. And I should mention, even though I do have, of course, guests lined up for the next several weeks, if there is someone that you know of in your life, in your community, that you admire or you just love what she does, please feel free to send me a message. Funny Wine Girl Janine, I have on Facebook. Laugh to Live, I'm on Facebook. You can just reach out to me. If you see me out and about, please share. If there's a woman that, or if it's you, just let me know if you have something that you'd like to talk about here on my podcast. I'd love to have you. I think that's great. We need to share as much information for women. And it's also great, I think, for women to be reminded that a lot of times we're not going through what we're going through alone. And we're not weirdos because we're going through it. And it's great to have a sense of community, to get information, inspiration, and some entertainment. So that's my goal here every week. So thank you so much for listening. Check out the show notes to connect with Elizabeth at lifepurposely.com. And, and Wellkind is a wonderful school, as Elizabeth mentioned, for young children. If you have in Scranton, you can check that out also, wellkind.com, right, Elizabeth, is it?
We are wellkind.com.
Wellkind.com if you want to learn more about that here in Scranton. So once again, I'm super excited to bring you more guests this year. And I want to say, as I always do every week, thank you. And I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.